Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel MR.Creepy. So today's video is definitely going to creep you out. In this video, we're getting into some of the most disturbing, real-sounding experiences people have had in remote cabins, far away from anyone who could help them. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Alright, let's get into tonight's stories. I rented the cabin because it was the cheapest place within an hour of the trailhead. It was the kind of listing you scroll past a dozen times before finally kicking when your budget gets real. 2 photos, both a little blurry, no exterior shots, and a description that sounded like it was written 5 years ago, but it was close to where I needed to be for work the next morning, and it had heat and running water, so I booked it. The drive out was already unsettling in a way I couldn't justify. My GPS kept losing signal, and the last 15 minutes were on a narrow road that turned from pavement to broken gravel without warning. By the time I pulled up, it was already dark, and the cabin was just a box-shaped shadow with one yellow square of light in the front window. Inside, it was fine. Too clean, if anything. No clutter, no personal touches, just a couch, a small kitchen, a single bedroom, and a little table with 2 chairs. The only thing that stuck out was the nightstand drawer next to the bed, which was pulled open an inch like someone had been going through it and forgot to close it all the way. My first discomfort was small. I figured the cleaner had been in a rush, but it still bothered me. I dumped my bag on the bed, walked over, and pushed the drawer shut with my knuckles. It didn't feel like anything at the time, just one of those little, "this isn't a hotel" reminders. I should have left it alone. I heated up some food I brought in a plastic container, ate at the table, and put a podcast on my phone to drown out the silence. The cabin was so quiet that when the fridge kicked on, I jumped. I tried the TV, but it was just local channels, fuzzing in and out, so I gave up and decided to read a bit and go to sleep early. When I went back into the bedroom, the drawer was open again. Same drawer, same gap, about an inch. I stood at the door and stared at it longer than made sense for a piece of wood and a metal handle. I hadn't heard anything move. I hadn't gone back in there since I closed it. I told myself the cabin wasn't level, that maybe it slid on its own. I walked over, pulled it open all the way this time, and saw a thin, hardbound guestbook inside, the kind you see in vacation rentals where people write, "We had a great time," and list their kids' names. I almost smiled. It was such a normal, corny thing to find after making it weird in my head. Oh. The first entries were exactly what you'd expect: couples thanking the owner, families talking about hiking and board games and how peaceful the area was. The date started 5 years back and moved forward in a neat, dense line of handwriting. Halfway through, the tone shifted. There was an entry that just said, "Woke up and the back door was unlocked. I know I locked it. Please fix the latch." No sign-off, no hearts, no smiley faces. Just that. The date was about a year ago. The next few were normal again. Then another. Someone walked on the porch at 3:17 a.m. I checked. There were footprints, but no car. Please be honest about neighboring properties. There weren't any other cabins anywhere near here. I'd driven far enough to know that. My bad decision, my rule break, was simple. I kept reading even after I started feeling like I shouldn't. I could have shut the book, closed the drawer, and blamed the tone on some anxious guest. Instead, I started flipping faster, scanning dates and words for something worse, almost daring the book to give me a reason to be afraid. Near the back, in a tight, shaky handwriting, I found the first proof something was seriously wrong. "Owner, if you see this, please call me." He came in again while I was in the shower. I heard him breathing outside the curtain. There's nowhere to run out here. No name, just a phone number scratched over so hard the paper nearly tore. I checked the date. It was 2 months before my stay. I set the book down slowly. The heater kicked off, and the cabin went silent again. That's when I noticed I could hear something else, faint but steady, a slow rhythmic creaking from somewhere above me, like weight shifting on old wood. I hadn't seen a second floor. I told myself it was the roof in the wind. I told myself a lot of stupid things. Instead of getting in my car and leaving, I did what felt like the reasonable thing in the moment. I grabbed my phone, walked into the living room, and texted the number on the booking details for the owner. "Hey, just checked in. Everything looks fine. Quick question. Is there an attic or second floor here?" Hearing some creaks above bedroom, I watched the little sending circle spin, then turn into delivered. No reply. Creak. Pause. Creak. I went back into the bedroom and forced myself to look up. The ceiling was low and flat, the same cheap paneling as the walls. In the far corner, near the closet, I saw it, a small square cutout with a recessed lip around it. No handle, no rope, just a panel set into the ceiling, barely noticeable unless you were looking. The second proof of wrongness came when I checked the closet. I told myself I was being thorough. I opened the door, half expecting to find nothing but hangers. There was a metal step ladder, folded and leaning against the back wall, like it had been put there for a reason. I didn't touch it. I closed the closet, went back to the bed, and picked up the guestbook again with fingers that didn't feel steady anymore. At the very back, on the inside of the rear cover, someone had written in block letters, "If you hear him above you, do not call out. Do not ask there. He likes their dot. He wills when you talk to him. No date, no signature." My brain did this frantic, useless ping-pong between possibilities. Prank, weird local joke, some previous guest with issues. And I didn't want to finish that thought something that had nothing to do with jokes. I made my choice then, and it wasn't brave. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and the guest book. I left the lights on and walked straight out to the car without turning around. When I started the engine, the cabin's front window reflected my headlights back at me. For a split second, I thought I saw someone standing just inside the glass, a darker shape against the light. But when I squinted, it was just my own outline, warped by the pain. I drove until I had enough signal to call the number on the listing. It rang 4 times before a man picked up. "Yeah," he said. "Hi, this is the guest at your cabin for tonight. I left. I know it's late, but I don't feel safe there. I think someone's been in the attic or something." There was a pause, just a little too long. "You weren't supposed to open that drawer," he said. My mouth went dry. I didn't. What drawer?" "The nightstand," he said softly. "I told her not to leave it there." I hung up. I didn't mean to. My thumb just reacted. I kept driving until I found a motel off the main highway. The room smelled like old smoke, and the sheets were thin, but at least there was a parking lot and other cars and people walking around. The irreversible consequence is small from the outside, but it changed everything. I don't stay in freestanding rentals anymore. If a place doesn't have shared walls, hallways, neighbors, I can hear through the thin drywall. I don't book it. Even in hotels, I still check the ceilings for panels and the closets for ladders. I threw the guest book away in the motel dumpster that night, but that didn't fix anything. The part I can't shake isn't the ceiling, or the creaking, or the ladder. It's the way the owner said her, like he knew exactly who had written in that book, and the fact that, in all those pages of happy entries and polite little notes, there wasn't a single one signed with a woman's name in the last year. The year I turned 30, my sister and I decided we were too old to keep talking about trips we never took. She found the cabin online, a small place on a quiet lake, no neighbors in sight, advertised as a disconnect and reset getaway. The pictures showed a little dock, a rowboat, and a simple wooden place tucked just inside the tree line. I didn't argue. I'd just gotten out of a long relationship, and being somewhere with no service and no expectations sounded like exactly what I needed. It was supposed to be 3 nights, reading, cooking simple meals, and talking like we used to before our lives got complicated. The drive out wasn't bad, just long. We stopped for groceries at the last decent-sized town, filled the cooler, and followed the owner's written directions when the signal died. By the time we turned down the gravel road that hugged the lake, the sun was setting behind the tree line in this muted orange strip. The cabin looked like the pictures. Same little dock, same rowboat, tied to a metal ring. Same faded blue paint on the door. Inside, it was basic but comfortable. 2 small bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, a living room with a low couch, and a fireplace that probably hadn't been used in years. The first small discomfort wasn't anything dramatic. It was just the other cabin. We noticed it while we were hauling bags in. Across the lake, through a break in the trees, there was another structure, maybe 100 yards of water away. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but when I squinted, I could see the shape of a roofline and the faint grid of windows catching the last light. I thought he said there weren't any neighbors, my sister Nora said, nodding toward it. He did, I said. I remember the listing specifically mentioning no nearby properties as a selling point. We stood on the dock for a minute, both of us looking. The cabin across the water was dark. No lights, no movement. The shore around it was overgrown, wild in a way ours wasn't. Probably abandoned, I finally said, or just not rented out. She made a face. Creepy, she said. Then she let it go. We settled in, made pasta, opened a bottle of wine we didn't really like, but drank anyway. By 11, the lake had gone completely black, and the silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of our own place settling. The bad decision, the rule break, was mine. It didn't feel like one at the time. The next morning, after coffee and an argument about whether instant oatmeal counted as cooking, I suggested we take the rowboat out. Why? Nora asked, eyeing the water. She's always been less comfortable with anything she can't stand on. Just to paddle around, I said. Check out the lake. We drove all this way. We should at least see more than the dock. She hesitated, then shrugged. Fine, but you're rowing. We loaded up a thermos and paddled lazily, staying close to shore. From the middle of the lake, the air felt colder, and I realized how far we actually were from anything. A car was up by a bend in the gravel road. You couldn't see from the water. No houses, no sounds of other people, just our cabin, grayish in the daylight and the trees. Look, Nora said suddenly. I turned. We drifted farther than I realized. The other cabin, the one across the lake, was directly ahead of us now, much closer than it looked from our dock. In the daytime, it was clearly in worse shape than ours. The roof sagged a little, and the porch was mottled with dark patches that might have been rot. Let's not get closer, she said quickly. We're just looking, I said. We're not going on shore. That was the first line I crossed. Even if it was small, we didn't need to be there. There was no reason to point the boat toward that shore, but I did anyway, the oars dipping into the water with little, even sounds. When we were maybe 20 feet from land, it happened, the first proof that something was wrong. One of the upstairs windows was cracked open, and behind the glass, in the dim interior, something white moved. I froze mid-stroke. Nora saw it too, because she grabbed the sides of the boat hard enough to make it wobble. Did you see that? She said. It could have been a curtain, I told myself. A bit of fabric catching a breeze. Except there wasn't any wind. The surface of the lake was flat and still, like someone had laid glass over it. What do you want to bet some weird hermit lives there? Nora muttered. Let's just go back, I said. I turned the boat around. We didn't say much on the way, both of us rowing now without coordinating, eager to be at our dock again. When we got back, I tied the boat off and tried to shrug it off out loud. It's probably an old hunting cabin, I said. Maybe the owner just hasn't updated the listing. She didn't answer. She went back inside without waiting for me. The day passed normally. We read. We made sandwiches. We took turns napping. By late afternoon, it had almost become a joke between us. Our creepy neighbor across the lake. Something to reference and roll our eyes at. That night, though, I woke up with my heart doing that heavy, mistimed thudding that doesn't match your breathing. The bedroom was dark, but I could tell something had changed in the house. The quiet was wrong. I got up and padded into the living room. Careful not to wake Nora, the crook over the couch said. 2:41 a.m. The air felt colder, like the fire we'd let die hours ago had taken all the warmth with it. I glanced at the front door to make sure it was locked. The deadbolt was in place. The little brass key, The unique object that came with the cabin and felt too personal to be just decorative was still hanging on its nail by the doorframe, swinging slightly like it had just been bumped. I hadn't touched it. Neither had Nora. It had been still when we went to bed. That was the second proof of wrongness, and it didn't feel like a small one. I walked to the window that faced the lake and pulled the curtain back a sliver. The other cabin was lit. Not fully, not warmly, just a single pale light in one downstairs window, shining out across the black surface of the water, like an eye half open. Something moved in front of it, a shape crossing the room, then stopping. I couldn't make out any details, just that there was someone there now, where there hadn't been anyone all day. I let the curtain fall back into place. Is it them? Nora's voice came from behind me, low and rough with sleep. I turned. She was standing in the hallway in a long t-shirt, arms folded, watching me. You saw it too? I asked. The light, she said. And the key? We looked at the little metal key again. It had stopped moving, perfectly centered on its nail, like it had always been that way. We should leave, she said. It's the middle of the night, I said automatically. The rational part of my brain started listing reasons. Unfamiliar roads, no cell service, animals crossing highways. We can go in the morning. There's probably some explanation. For what? She asked. Her voice had an edge to it now. For a cabin that doesn't exist on the listing, having someone turn on a light exactly across from ours after we get closer to it. For your magic swinging key. I didn't have an answer. We argued in low voices for a few minutes, me trying to be the reasonable one, her pushing to just pack our bags and drive. In the end, we compromised in the way scared people always do. We moved the couch in front of the door, shut every curtain, and agreed to stay awake together until dawn. We made tea. We played cards by the weak light of a lamp. Every hour or so, one of us would look at the lake-facing window without opening the curtain, as if we could feel what was happening outside through the thin glass. Around 4, I caved and checked again. The other cabin was dark. No light, no movement, just a black shape against a blacker background. We left as soon as the sky turned the faintest gray. We didn't wash the dishes or make the beds. We packed in silence, both pretending not to feel like we were about to be caught doing something wrong in someone else's house. The irreversible consequence came when we tried to talk to the owner afterward. On the drive back once, we had signaled I sent him a long message that we'd had a good stay, but that the listing should be updated to mention the other property across the lake, that someone had clearly been there, that it made us uncomfortable. He replied with a single sentence. There is no other cabin on this lake. I sent a picture. I'd taken one that first morning without thinking, of the view from our dock, our feet, the water, and the distant shape of the other place framed by trees. An hour later, he answered again. I don't know what you're trying to do, he wrote, but please don't contact me again. I went back to the photo and zoomed in until the pixels blurred. The trees, the shoreline, the faint reflection on the water, all of it was there. The cabin wasn't. You can say I messed up the picture somehow. You can say we were tired and letting our imaginations run wild. I've said those things to myself plenty of times. But when I think about that night, about the light in the window, and the way the key on its nail swung like someone's fingers had just left it, I don't feel confused. I feel watched, and ever since then, anywhere I go near water, I catch myself scanning the far shore, looking not for houses or lights, but for something missing that should be there. I bought my cabin because I was tired of sharing walls. My last apartment had neighbors on every side above, below, and one who played the same 3 songs on repeat at 2 in the morning. The cabin was supposed to be my opposite life. 30 minutes from town, a narrow driveway off a county road, and enough trees around it that I couldn't see another house in any direction. For the first year, it was exactly what I needed. I worked remotely, stacked my days with video calls and spreadsheets, and then stepped onto my porch each evening into air that smelled like pine and damp earth instead of exhaust. I cooked, read, learned to split wood badly, and started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. The first small discomfort was easy to ignore. It was just a sound. It started late one October, right after the temperatures dropped and the leaves were mostly on the ground. Around midnight, maybe a little after, I'd hear a single crack somewhere out in the woods, like a branch snapping underfoot. Not loud, not close, just enough to pull me up from the edge of sleep. I told myself it was deer. That's what everyone says when you mention noises in the woods. It's probably deer. I even started saying it out loud, like I needed to hear it in a human voice. Probably deer, I'd mutter, rolling over and forcing my eyes shut. The bad decision came a couple of weeks later. By then, the nights had gotten colder, and I'd fallen into a routine. Shut down my laptop at 10, lock the doors, turn off the lights, and sit in the dark living room for a few minutes, just listening, before going to bed. It made me feel like I knew what normal sounded like out there. One night, I heard the crack again, then another, not random, this time paced almost, like someone stepping carefully on dry sticks. Instead of staying inside, I broke my own unspoken rule and went out to check. I grabbed the heavy flashlight I kept hanging by the door, the unique object that felt more like a talisman than a tool, and stepped onto the back porch in my socks. The air hit my lungs like something solid. I stood there for a second, breathing steam, listening. Crack, a little to the left, not far. I clicked the flashlight on and swept the beam across the yard. Nothing, just my woodpile, the picnic table, the dark wall of trees, starting where the patchy grass gave up. The beam reached only so far before it got swallowed, making the woods look less like a place and more like a backdrop. I waited another minute, then went back inside, telling myself it had been an animal, just like before. That would have been the end of it if it had stopped there. It didn't. The first proof something was actually wrong came on a Saturday afternoon. A few days later, I was raking leaves, filling black trash bags, and dragging them to the side of the house to deal with later. The sun was low, and the air had that brittle, metallic feel it gets before a real cold front. I was tying off a bag when I heard it again. The crack. Same sound, same place, except it was daytime, and there was no reason for it to make my heart jump the way it did. I straightened up and let my eyes adjust to the darker band of trees beyond the yard. That's when I saw him. He was just inside the tree line, far enough back that most of him was in shadow. I wouldn't have noticed if he'd been still, but he was shifting his weight from one leg to the other, like he'd been standing there too long, and his muscles were starting to complain. He was wearing a dark jacket and a beanie. Nothing distinctive. He could have been anyone. That was what made it worse. We stood there for a beat that felt too long. Then I raised my hand, halfway between a wave and a reflex. "Hey," I called. My voice sounded thin even to me. He didn't answer. He turned slightly, just enough that I felt, not saw, his attention settle fully on me. Then he stepped backward, and the trees took him. No hurry, no stumble, like he was going back to where he was supposed to be. I told myself he was a hunter, maybe on someone else's land and cutting through by mistake. I'd bought 6 acres, but the property lines in that area were messy. People wondered. It happened. Still, I went inside and locked the door. I checked it twice. That night, every sound was louder. The fridge cycling, the old house creaking, even the heat kicking on made me flinch. Around midnight, when the crack came again, my hand was already on the flashlight before I realized I'd moved. I didn't go outside this time. I just sat on the couch in the dark, the flashlight off, but ready, staring at the back door and listening to my own pulse. The second proof of wrongness showed up the next morning. I opened the back door to let some air in and nearly stepped on them. A line of footprints in the thin frost on the porch. They started at the top step, came right to the door, stood there for a while, a cluster of overlapping impressions from shifting feet, and then turned back the way they'd come. The door was still locked from the inside. My spare key was in the kitchen drawer, where it had been since I moved in. There was no reason for anyone to be on my porch in the middle of the night. I backed up, shut the door gently, and called the non-emergency line for the sheriff's office. A deputy came out in the afternoon, a tall guy with a sunburned neck and a polite distance that said he'd heard weirder. He walked the property with me. We found the tree line where I'd seen the man, a little gap between 2 pines where the ground was worn. We followed it a few yards into the woods until it crossed an old, faint trail covered in leaves. "Could be someone camping," he said, "or using the old logging road back there. Technically, this backs up to state land after your lot ends." "Is it legal?" I asked. He hesitated. "Depends where they were standing," he said. "I'll put a note in the system. We'll swing by more often." It sounded like the kind of thing you say to make someone feel better. It didn't. My bad decisions started stacking up after that. I bought motion lights and installed them myself, balancing on a folding chair while my hands shook. I set up a cheap camera by the back door that sent clips to my phone when it detected movement. And, most foolishly, I tried to keep living my routine like nothing had changed, as if acting normal would make it true. For a week, the camera didn't catch anything but squirrels and one stray cat. The motion lights came on at random times, spooked by the wind, or who knows what. I started to feel stupid about how scared I'd been. Then, on a Tuesday at 3:12 a.m., the camera caught him. I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Half awake, I thumbed the screen and saw the notification. Motion detected. Back door. I opened the clip. The angle was bad. I'd mounted the camera too high, but I could see enough. A figure at the edge of the frame, right at the bottom of the porch steps. He moved slowly up them, one at a time, until he reached the top. He stood there, facing the door, hood up this time. He didn't try the handle. He didn't knock. He didn't look around. He angled his face toward the camera and, for a full 5 seconds, just stared into it. Even in grainy infrared, I could see the pale oval of his skin, the dark pits of his eyes. Then he stepped backward and out of frame, the same way he had in the tree line. I called 911 that time. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I checked that the doors were locked again, that the windows were latched. A patrol car came out, lights off, and swept the property with their own flashlights. They didn't find him. They did, however, find something else. A small pile of cigarette butts behind one of the trees at the edge of my yard, arranged in a little circle in the dirt. None of them looked weathered. They'd been smoked recently. Could be teenagers, one of the officers said, even as he said they'd keep an eye on the area. His tone didn't match his words. The irreversible consequence came after the third visit, the one I didn't actually witness, just heard. It was another late night, another crack, another notification. By then, I'd stopped checking the clips right away. It felt like admitting something was happening every time I opened one. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at the table, and finally pulled up the latest clip. At first, I thought the camera had malfunctioned. The angle was different. The porch looked skewed. Then I realized why. The camera was pointed at my back door from outside. He'd taken it down, or someone had. The clip started with a jolt as the image tilted, then steadied. The door filled the frame. My own curtains were drawn behind a glass pane, a pale rectangle. The timestamp blinked. 2:58 a.m. There was no movement, no sound, just a slow zoom as whoever was holding the camera stepped closer until the door handle was a dark curve in the center of the shot. And then, very gently, the handle turned, just enough to test it. It stopped at the limit of the lock. There was a long pause. Then the footage cut out. I didn't finish my coffee. I packed a bag, threw some clothes in the back of my car, and drove into town to stay at a motel. When I came back with a friend a few days later to collect the rest of my things, there were no more footprints, no more cigarette butts. The motion lights were off, their bulbs unscrewed. The heavy flashlight by the back door was gone. The deputy asked again if I was sure I'd locked the place before I left. I was. I still am. People ask why I sold the cabin instead of waiting it out, why I didn't install better cameras or get a dog or buy a gun, and stand my ground. They don't understand the part that stayed with me. It wasn't just that someone knew my routines, or that he'd gotten close enough to handle my door. It was that he'd taken the camera, recorded himself testing my lock, and then left the evidence where I'd see it. He wanted me to know how close he'd gotten. He wanted me to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't turned that deadbolt that night, if I'd forgotten just once. And that's the part I haven't been able to put down. I live in a townhouse now, in a noisy complex where kids scream in the parking lot, and someone's always arguing down the hall. I sleep with a white noise machine and the TV on low, pretending it helps. But some nights, When the building settles and something in the next unit cracks, I'm back on that porch in my head, barefoot in the cold, holding a flashlight that doesn't feel heavy enough. And every time my phone buzzes in the middle of the night, even if it's just a spam email or a random notification, my first thought isn't, "Who is it?" It's, "How close did he get this time?" So you've just heard of different remote cabin experiences, each disturbing in its own way, but all pointing to the same quiet truth. It's never really the cabin that's dangerous. It's the people who decide what happens once you're cut off from everyone else. Out of these 4 stories, which one got under your skin the most, and why? Was it the hidden attic, the cabin across the lake, the watcher in the trees, or the locked storage room? If you're still here listening in the dark, let me know your favorite story number in the comments. Tell me what kind of horror you want to hear next. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.